Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. It is a few minutes past 3. So we are going to proceed now. And I think the purpose of today's session is basically just to answer the question of how do we go about studying tax? Because I think for many students, it's become a challenge, especially the transition from undergraduate to postgraduate, studying taxation. And what is a good way to actually, learn the subject? And there are many different learning systems that you can look up in the internet. But ultimately, I think we need to know how to go about doing it for a specific subject like tax, which is very much rule-based and based on legislation. So I'm going to share my slides with you now. Let's go through the topic. Hopefully everybody can see the screen here. But so what I'm going to cover in today's session is there's different levels of thinking, first of all, that go into any subject that you're doing. And we need to know what those levels of thinking are and what are psych expectations of those thinking. When you go write a PGDA exam or an IAC exam, what are the expectations as to where your level of thinking will actually be. And then we look at the difference between learning system versus the learning strategy. And then we go into the actual system of studying tax, which is what I call the PERRIO system. It's a system that's well researched. It's been done for quite a while now. How we go about applying the system to taxation, I think is going to be important. Your own self-reflection, and finally, how to use AI as well in your learning system to be incorporated for taxation or any other subject. Important to note that it doesn't have to be tax that we're dealing with here. It can be accounting, it can be auditing, it can be management. You can apply the system to any subject you want because it's variable. It can be very flexible. So you can use it how you want to use it. I'm using it here specifically for taxation. I've tailored it for taxation, but it doesn't mean it's going to be limited to taxation. You can use it for any particular subject you want to learn, right? Without further ado, let's go into the levels of thinking. So remember, when we go into exams and especially when it comes to summative assessments like final exams, there's 6 levels that the people who are setting assessments will go through. And one of them is remembering as the first level of thinking. You must remember what you studied. But also the second level, understand it. So some people are good at regurgitating stuff, but they don't really understand it to a deep level. If you don't understand it and remember it, you definitely can't apply it. And in tax, in many of the cases, we're looking at tax law. It's application based. So we don't give marks for restating the law, but we do give marks for applying the law. So if you understand which law applies given the situation and the circumstance, that's the first step of getting it right. And then secondly, do you know how the provision actually applies itself? So identify provision first is the first part of it, and the second part is the correct application of the provision will give you good marks in application. But sometimes we go beyond application. We go to analysis, like for example, where you have to evaluate which package a person is taking. Does he take this package or does he accept an offer from another company when taking a package from a tax perspective? What is the after-tax cash flow of both options? So that's analysis. And if you go beyond analysis, then is evaluation. So you evaluate based on after-tax cash flow, which one is better, and you look at the qualitative reasons as well. So this is as far as normally we go in PGDA. So if you remember your stuff, if you understand it, and you can apply it correctly and analyze and evaluate it, you've got the whole level of thinking that's required at PGDA level. Creating means starting a new, creating new information and knowledge. That's normally at master's level and at PhD level. So we don't really concern ourselves with the create level right now, but definitely for tax and many disciplines in accounting, up to the evaluate stage, you probably need to know. Now, having said that, Psycha also have expectations on their side in terms of the competency framework. They expect you to be problem solvers. So if you find a problem, they want you to come up with a creative solution to that problem. They also expect you to be critical thinkers in the sense that you're able to research, investigate, look at the source of the information, understand that information, apply a judgment, and apply that information correctly to any situation. As part of that, decision making becomes important, and that's why managerial accounting and finance is given such big prominence in the IAC and the ITC, is because it deals with decision making. So that decision making ability that you get from there can be applied in every other discipline as well. And Psycha expects you to be good decision makers when it comes to that. The other part of Psycha is integrated thinking, and this is how you develop your own decision making approach in terms of integrated thinking when you have a very, very complex problem. So when you have a very, very difficult problem that's multifaceted, you need to be able to think very quickly, but also be able to think in multiple dimensions, not just from one perspective, but in multiple perspectives. So psycho expectations and thinking is that basically the accountant of the future will be able to be a problem solver, but also think deeply, make the right decisions, and think in an integrated way, multiple perspectives from multiple angles. And that's basically what we're trying to promote in our integration as well. Because when you look at integration question, you're looking from an accounting angle, you're looking from a tax angle, you might look at it from an auditing angle, ethics angle, or from a managerial accounting and finance angle. You have to put all these different hats on, and that promotes integrated thinking as well. Also, critical thinking. And as part of that, you're solving problems. You come up with solutions. So that's pretty much in context how tax and all our other four, or basically our big four subjects, which you did in third year and our PGDA, fits into the competency framework and psychos expectations of your thinking. But having said that, we all know there's a final exam happening, soon, and we all have to prepare for that. And it's not going to be easy because there's so much of volume. And students come to me all the time, what should I do in this 4 weeks that's now that I have on my hands? And I would think that we need to develop a good system, a learning system. But I think for each individual, that's going to be a different thing. For a person who's doing well in test 3 and test 4 and not particularly well in test 1 and test 2, then there's more work to be done in test 1 and test 2 topics as opposed to test 3 and test 4. You could spend your time where the risk is the most. And if the risk is really bad in certain sections and topics where you've done well, then you have to spend time with the risk is. My advice to all the students, in fact, is to also just go through your test scores from test 1 to test 4 when test 4 eventually gets released. And look at how you performed in discussion questions versus calculation questions. Just make a note of them, test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4, draw a table and say discussion, calculation, this is what I did in test 1, this is how much I got for discussion, this is how much I got for calculation out of it, get a percentage score out of that for all your tests, right? And then do it per topic, right? So you got the score, discussion, calculation, then do it per topic. Okay, for trust, I got 40%, right? The 24 out of 40, or maybe 16 out of 40. But for capital allowances, I got 25 out of 40. So let's put it down and say your percentage. That gives you an idea of where your strengths and your weaknesses are, because you need to know that going into it. It's not enough sometimes to say I know I'm strong here, I know I'm strong there. Sometimes the objective scores will actually give you an indication of where your strengths and weaknesses are. So it's a very good idea sometimes to actually just write down where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are by scoring. But look at your scores that you got, not your overall scores, but more specifically the scores per the question that you got. And you got your scripts to do that. So you got your scripts, you can say, okay, I got 20 here, 30 there, and you know where your weaknesses are from that. And that should guide also your strategy when you're learning for this period now for this 1 month as to where you are weak in and where to concentrate on. Right? So what's a learning strategy versus a learning system? Now, a learning strategy is one part of a system. So strategy, you could have a good strategy for mind mapping, for example, as to what are the possible ideas that come into play for a particular topic, or you might be good at summarizing or preparing for quiz. That's a good learning strategy for that activity. But a learning system goes beyond that in the sense that it basically encompasses all of this into a complete system from beginning to end. So it's not an isolated strategy for a particular technique that you're applying for memorization or for application or for summarization or for idea creation. It's basically a complete system from beginning to end, from the time you first are in touch with that knowledge to the time that you finish your exam. So that's pretty much how a learning system should work. And it's different to a strategy in that sense, where the strategy is isolated, but the system is complete. And I just want to tell you that, what you're doing now is probably one of the most important things you're going to do in your life, because at PGDA level, the volume is tremendous. It's one of the highest volumes you'll ever have to do it. And people always say that knowledge is your power. But if knowledge is your power, then learning is your superpower. Because in order to get knowledge, you need to learn. And if you don't have the knowledge, you can't do anything. But if you don't learn, you don't get the knowledge. So which is more important, learning or knowledge? Well, learning is the most important because you wouldn't have knowledge if you didn't learn. Right? And can you imagine the potential and how brilliant you would be if you could just learn everything, like new concepts in minutes, and have 100% recall of that. Because that's the power that you need to develop in your mind. Right? So your mind is everything. Why are they paying you all those high salaries to CAs? Because they've developed their minds to that ability, to that level, where they're able to learn stuff very, very quickly and retain the knowledge associated with that. But so there's 3 parts of this model in your learning that you need to be aware of. And these are the psychological aspects of it, right? First part is your mindset. don't ever talk yourself down, right? In this process, whatever you do before this examination, psychologically you need to be positive. And I know it's hard, but your mindset needs to be such that you can't say, okay, I'm never going to make it in this exam, or I'm never going to be able to remember all the stuff, or I'm never going to be able to understand all the stuff. Don't keep on saying that. Say, I understand everything. I'll learn everything. I'll do everything. Just keep that mindset going. Keep that affirmation going. Repeat it. And interestingly enough, if you carry on repeating the same affirmation over and over again, suddenly it starts to affect your subconscious mind, because your subconscious mind is there existing. This is in the background of your conscious mind. And if you can influence that in a positive way, then your conscious mind starts to behave differently. You start to behave a bit more proactively and more positively and so on. So your subconscious mind affects your conscious mind, and your mindset is one of the most important things. So talk yourself up instead of talking yourself down. Talk yourself up and say, you know what, I am going to pass this exam. I have passed this examination. You can visualize it, your results coming out, all of that. And you can say, you know what, I learn quickly. That information that I learn quickly. Keep on repeating, I learn quickly, I learn quickly, I learn quickly. Walk around the house, I learn quickly, I learn quickly. That will slowly become part of your reality. You'll be amazed at how this affects your subconscious mind. But talking yourself up is an important part of your psychology, because you need to be positive. You need to be able to learn quickly and remember the information. And you need a psychological foundation for that. And the psychological foundation is in your mindset. So many students, have the ability to do it, but have a poor mindset, because the mindset doesn't support them. They just have the fear and the doubt within themselves kills them to a certain degree. So that mindset part of it, I can't emphasize enough. You got to have a growth mindset, a positive mindset, and you got to keep on repeating affirmations, visualization. The two tools you can use are actual affirmation and visualization. Keep on repeating the stuff. Close your eyes, repeat for 5 minutes before you go and study. After you study, repeat it again, walk around. I know it sounds crazy and ridiculous, but it's what you need to change your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is telling you something, that you're not good enough, or you doubt yourself. But you need to change that subconscious mind also by your conscious efforts. And your conscious efforts means visualizing positive things about this examination, affirming what's positive in your life, and affirming that you can do it. Right? Then motivation, because some people just don't have the motivation. Say, you know what, I'm so drained out during the year. These tests were so exhausting. The lectures were exhausting. I don't have any energy for this. But remember, what's at stake here? Right? If you pass this, you through with formal studies forever for many people, right? And what you go into now is work. You're in the workplace. Whatever happens, you're going to stay in the workplace. You're part of the workforce of the country. So that should be, motivation enough. Whether you passed the board exam or not, whether you qualify or not, you're still going to be a proper accountant as a professional in South Africa. Right? So that should be a good motivating factor to get out there, because you're going to start working, earning money, start, buying better clothes. I'm not going to say buying better clothes, but you can start traveling a bit, buy cars, whatever it is, moving around. But that's motivation, and basically, also, if you're joining some of the firms, they actually send you overseas. So that's also a good motivation, So have that motivation to do it, because there's so much on the line for you to achieve, right? And the last part of it is the method. The method needs to be good, which is this actual system we're going to discuss today when you're going through how to study for taxation. So you need to have a good method to get to your knowledge level, right? So let's go to the actual system, right? To study taxation. But as I said before, you can use this for any discipline you want, right? This system was actually developed by a doctor who's also a master of education. He's a double master and a PhD, so he's got a high level of qualification. But he's also an straight A student. He was a medical student, in fact, before, and then had I won't say poor marks, but average marks in medicine. But then was able to boost his marks up to distinction level, such that he was, I think, number 1 in the class. I think after he had finished his medical degree, he became number 1 in the class in masters and MBA. And he said the system actually saved him a lot of time studying, because in medicine, just like accounting, you have a lot of volume coming through. So if you want to go and watch the videos by Justin Sung, please do. I openly encourage you to do it, because there's so much of stuff there. I can't distill all the information that's in these learning systems, but if you want to go there, go to the link. I'm going to post the slides on Learn, so you got access to them, and you can basically use them as you need for reference. You can use the YouTube link and go check Justin's website out. Very, very good for learning and accelerated learning as well. So these are all things that can help you in terms of your technology and getting to where you want to be. Right? So what are the 6 steps that you need to know to study taxation. Right? The first one is what they call priming. Right? So this is basically where you go through, and many people are doing this. I have no doubt that our students are actually doing priming in the sense that you are looking at the pre-recorded videos. Maybe not all of them, because some of them are long, but I think you are going through them and you are reading the lecture slides, right? And the module notes. So you have to do all this stuff before to get your brain familiar with this topic, right? So you watch the video, you read the lecture slides, you read the module notes, and some of you, well, I'll say fewer than most, attend the actual lecture where we do the interactive question, right? And that's all part of this priming process to get yourself. You're not saying that you're going to by heart it at this point in time. You're not going to memorize it or anything like that. But what you are doing is just trying to understand it, right? So and understand the important concepts of a topic. So whether it be trusts or estates or capital allowances, you go through the same process. You know, you go to module notes, you go to the video, you go to the lecture slides, and maybe some of you attend the lecture. So that's a very, very important part because you understand what the concepts are in the video. The module notes are extremely important. I would say the module notes are very important because they summarize the actual law you need to know. And you can use the module notes as a skeleton for the second step, which is encoding. So when you use the module notes has the legislative sections that you need to know. And those might be very long like that, or maybe very, very short, maybe like miscellaneous provisions or corporate rules. They're not too long. Maybe 6 or 7 provisions sometimes. Those 6 or 7 provisions now form the base of your learning in terms of what you need to know for that section, right? So priming, I think many people are doing, but the second step is where the distinction comes in. Then for me, when I've seen and I've discussed with many students, and even from the time that I was studying time ago, we didn't do it to this detail. But if you do it, I think it's going to really be good. And this is, I think, what separates many distinction students from average students and many other students who are not performing, above 50%. So encoding is the second step. This technique allows you to now actively understand and integrate that knowledge with what you have already, right? So it's about taking the new information that you've come across. Let's say, for example, section 24BA and section 40CA and 45 and 42, and now it now becomes part of you. It integrates into your mind with everything that you've learned before, right? And it also goes deeper than just understanding it. You now have to simplify it into simple terms, right? That you can explain this to someone on the street, right? But you've also analyzed it to some degree to say how it would be asked in an exam or a test, and what would your proposed solution actually be if it was asked that way? How does it fit in with other sections in tax? Those are finding connections and actually documenting this whole process down for your learning. And it doesn't have to be long. I mean, encoding typically takes 1 to 2 pages of a summary. That's all. 1 to 2 pages of a summary per section. Right? So if you're doing, for example, corporate rules, that's just 2 pages of corporate rules that you got. But that 2 pages is extremely valuable because there's a lot of hard work that you've gone into those 2 pages that you do. Those 2 pages basically have gone into detail about the section and your own knowledge, right? So you simplify it, explain it in very, very simple terms. You analyze it. What are the effects on tax, right? You find connections with previous parts of the syllabus, and all of that is documented in the summary of encoding that you have. Sometimes the summary of 2 pages might not be enough to actually capture everything. So you go into referencing, which means that if there's some detail that you want to remember from a TUC, for example, that asks a question on this, on capital allowances or corporate rules, then what you do is, if it's not captured in your summary is already maxed, you only got your 1 page of stuff here, you put a small flashcard or a small post-it note, these small notes that you get, and just write some of those details and you attach it to your summary, right? These small notes that you got there, you do small notes for the examples or the top principles that came out in that you really want to remember, because the big detail is not going to be in the summary, but the little detail that you want, just keep those flashcards ready for the important principle that you picked up in a TUT question that came out that you learned that wasn't part of your learning process, right? So that's referencing, where we take some of the more detailed information and put that into those small cards. And then step 4 is extremely important. It's no point you know the stuff so in such detail when you studied it, but you can't remember it, right? So you have to be able to retrieve knowledge quickly. So, and this is where your memory comes into place, right? So you've encoded it, you've analyzed it, you can give the example, but you can't remember how to explain this thing. or you forgot what the analysis was, what analysis you actually did, right? So it's important to know it, to understand it, but it's equally important to be able to retrieve it, right? So remember, in the examination, it's all about retrieving information that's already there in your head. So if the CPU is damaged, you can't retrieve anything. So you have to take care of yourself. At the same time, you've got to have a system that you're able to retrieve with speed. That means basically you don't have to wait around and think about how did I study this, how did it link together. You got to be able to it has to be on your fingertips. And that retrieval will serve you well when you go into the paper, because not only do you have the knowledge at your disposal, you also needed to identify the issues or the trigger points in a question, which give rise to certain sections in a provision, which apply in a tax question. So you need to know that. Now, the first step is now going to step into another level where you are integrating with other subjects, right? So they call it interleaving. I call it more, in our context, it's more integration, right? Where you now have to say, okay, wait, I know my own subject well. I know the tax principles of this well. I know Section 24B has this capital allowances on this side, etc. But how would it fit into an accounting question? How would it fit into a math question? How would it fit into an auditing question? And that approaching from different angles, interleaving, is a higher level function that many students don't do, right? And because they don't understand it, they haven't done encoding well. That means they don't understand the principle of the topic itself to in sufficient depth. They can't do integration because they don't even understand the primary information properly to start off with. So as long as you understand the primary information to a high level, like how you've done in encoding and referencing, you can now start to link that. And I'm going to show you how to use AI as well in your interleaving process in step 5, which is integration. And then the last step, which is step 6, is going deeper into the topic itself, going into past papers, going to past exam papers. And I spoke about past papers, and everybody loves past papers. They love past test papers because they think the same thing is going to come out over and over again. The unfortunate thing is that things do change, and no past paper or many past papers are not exactly the same, even though the principle might be the same. They test it in a different way, or the different facts, different circumstances, different scenarios to it. And people just want to regurgitate what they learned in the paper. Step 6 is trying to get your knowledge to such a level where you've gone through ITC papers, you've gone to past year exam papers, you've gone to test papers, and so on, so that you're well prepared for it. Many people, what I'm seeing here is they're doing this step here like very well. They're doing this step not very well, right? This is like partially done. I would say this step they're doing all the time, and and the retrieval is there. There is some retrieval, so people are remembering some of the stuff, right? But not all of it. And you can't go from step 1 to step 6. You have to go through this process in order to get there. Integration, people are not considering enough, I don't think. Referencing, well, that's part of encoding. So when you look at it, which steps are you doing properly? Which steps are you not doing in your own system of learning for tax? Ask yourself that question, right? So if you're doing priming well, which I'm sure everybody's doing, that's fine. This step needs to be worked on, encoding, referencing, and efficient note-taking in terms of having the reference there. That's important. This needs to be worked on, retrieval, right? This definitely needs to be worked on. And this is only after you've done all 5. I would only do this once you've got all 5 steps done. If you don't have 5 steps done, don't worry about step 6, which is now looking at going deeper than the TUT questions and looking for all past year ITC papers and so on. Right? So that's the system in detail of explanation. So the rest of these slides now work with what that information actually is. We talked about priming. That was actually forming connections in your brain before you actually go deeper into the topic in encoding. Encoding is actually, as we said before, analyzing, simplifying, getting the connections done, deeply understanding the complex concepts that we need to do, right? We talked about referencing, right? Because you might not have enough in your 2 pages to get the detail of what you studied. You need to create these little cards or little what they call post-its. Write down the information in that and keep it attached, staple it to or put a file to it, and include it in your notes for your particular section. All this process is what they call active learning, and active learning they have found in the research allows for much better retention and analysis than passive learning. And they're sitting back and just reading the stuff. You want to be active. You want to be doing the stuff all the time. You want to be working drawing your diagram, drawing the things, and getting the information in, and just keep on questioning yourself. Right? This active process would allow for deeper learning to happen in your studies of taxation. Right? So that's referencing. Retrieval is about remembering everything that's in your summary. You should know everything that's in your summary before you go to the paper. You should know exactly which sections apply to which type of circumstances and transactions, and how they could be tested differently in the exam paper, and what your response would be if they were tested differently. Right? Step 5 and step 6. Step 5 being integration. You need to know, once you know your stuff, you need to know how to incorporate financial accounting, auditing, and management into the same subject that you've done from a tax perspective. And similarly, when you're doing an accounting topic, if you're doing financial instruments, you ask yourself, what's the tax consequences of this? What's the managerial accounting and finance consequences of this? How would I audit the financial instrument? So you do it for every other subject and see the linkages between the subjects when you're doing integration as part of your studying process for tax. The last part is actually going through all these deeper understandings of tax and integration by going through past papers, or going through other notes that you come across on the internet, or you go to interpretation notes, read the entire interpretation note, read the capital gains tax guide, the dividends tax guide, going beyond what we had given you as part of your learning. As I said before, you only go into this stage if you've covered the first 5 steps already to sufficient degree. So in a normal system, I mean, this is what happens typically. I think many people watch the videos, and that's the same in the PERRIO system. You would still watch a video, and then you'd also understand the rules from the slide and perhaps memorize them before the paper. In the PERRIO system, in step 2, you don't memorize anything. All you do is understand the rules, but then you start to make your own examples out of the rules. Right? So you start doing your own thing with the rules themselves to internalize that process. Right? If you don't do that, you haven't internalized it enough. It's still external to you. So you need to make it one with yourself. And the way you do that is create your own example with the principle. So if I buy this asset, how much do I claim in first year, second, third year? Do that actively, right? And then it becomes more closer to you, as opposed to you externally reading it and saying, okay, I understand this now. Right? Simplify your own example, then and then write down your connections with other topics that you've studied already. And you need to actually document those connections with other topics and how they interrelate and how they could be tested with this topic, right? For example, if you're doing capital gains tax, how would Section 84E now link with paragraph 66 and paragraph 65? You'd have an 84E recoupment, but you also have 64, 65 recoupment on that side. You have a capital allowance being claimed there as well. Show the links in your own documentation when you're documenting that. In step 3, we also look at the details of putting that down in more compact slides we talked about. Typically, what students do is highlight the act, right? So highlighting the act is not enough. Underlining is not enough. You got to document the stuff in detail and be able to, in the 4th step, memorize the stuff, actually know it off, right? And then the 5th step, of course, is, in integration, for most students, it's about, they think about it, but they haven't documented anything about it. So interleaving is also a process where you want to document what are the accounting principles here, what are the management principles here, what are the auditing principles here, and actually come up with a question you think and a solution in your head about this, and maybe perhaps document it down. We don't go deeply enough or deep enough in integration to actually cover ourselves for the integration risk that we face as students. And the last part, of course, is going through your test and exam, which everybody does. So everybody's doing step 6 very well. But as I said before, only do step 6 once you cover step 1 to step 5, and don't just do past papers and exam papers. Go to additional material. Like in tax, we have so much material. We have the court cases, we have interpretation notes, we have binding general rulings, we have guides. All these are available on the SARS website. So if you're going to do that, you're welcome to go ahead and do that about a topic, opinions, different commentaries from SITE and SICA and SIPA. So all these things are there as supplemental over and above the normal material that you've gone through. So that's pretty much a high level or a detailed summary, but now I'm going to go into actual example itself, right? How would you actually do this system for a topic, right? And I think this is where we're really going to learn how to apply study for tax using this complete system. So let's look at corporate rules, for example, week 3 in our syllabus. So if you had to go to corporate rules, you'd read the provisions of section 24BA, 45, 42, and 40CA. Those deals directly with corporate rules, so that's fine. We've gone to the lecture slides as well as part of priming. We've read the legislation, highlighted the legislation. That's good. And then thereafter that, we're not familiar with the topic, but we need to create our own summary about this. And how do we go about learning this in our own summary? Well, the first thing you're going to do is this exercise called grouping, right? What are the trigger events for this to actually happen? When does it happen, right? So we know what it is, but when does it happen? It happens when there's an exchange of an asset for a share, right, between a natural person normally and a company. And that's a trigger for it to apply. So it groups in that type of transaction. What is the transaction type that we're dealing with? We're dealing with a situation where there's an asset for share transaction, okay, between a natural person and a company. So we know where it falls in, and we know when this provision is going to come into play, right? The second thing is, how do you teach it, right? If you're going to teach it to your sibling or to your parents or to your cousin, how would you teach it? They're not accountants, right? So in simple terms, okay, if I had and try and break it down into very, very small amounts, like 2 Rand and 3 Rand and 4 Rand, those type of things. If I sold a pencil with a market value of 8 Rand, which I bought for 6 Rand, and exchanged it for a share worth 7 Rand, what would the tax consequence be, right? So I'm selling a market value asset of 8 Rand. I bought the pencil for 6 Rand. I'm exchanging for shares worth 7 Rand. So automatically in this process, I know that I bought something for 6, I'm selling it for 8. I'm selling with a market value of 8, but I'm exchanging for shares worth 7. So I'm getting shares of 7 Rand for something that I bought, which is 6 Rand. And then what would the tax consequences be for me as a person now issuing or exchanging this asset for shares in a company, right? Obviously, from a tax perspective, you're gonna say, well, I bought the asset for 6, but I'm receiving shares worth 7, so there must be a capital gain here for me when I'm selling these shares. What about the company? The company is giving away shares worth 7, but getting an asset worth 8. There's a deemed capital gain done at 24BA of 1 Rand for the company also, right? And then you got to look at, well, now what is the base cost of the company of the company that now has the asset itself? Is normally equal to the market value of the asset given up, right? Plus any deemed capital gain. So that's the base cost rule for the company that's got it, right? So that's, and you say in that case it's going to be, the base cost is going to be Rand for the company that's got the pencil, right? Okay, so for the person who sold the pencil, he's going to get a 1 Rand capital gain. For the company that buys the pencil, they're also going to have a capital gain. They're also going to keep that pencil at 8 Rand. And the person who gets the shares, he'll be governed by capital gains tax rules equal to the market value of the asset given up, right? 8 Rand. So that's, you're going to simplify that and just write that down in your summary, right? Simplify it in your own words and write that down as part of your 2-page summary. And then your analogy. How would it change if the market values were different and the asset was not 8 Rand? What if the market value of the shares were 8 Rand and the asset was 7 Rand? And in other words, the company is actually giving me value. It's a value shifting arrangement here, because the company is now giving me shares with 8, but I'm giving an asset of 7. So they're actually giving me a deemed dividend here, right? Of 1 Rand, and they pay 20% tax on the dividend, right? So change the scenario around. How has this been tested before in all the examinations, right? And last, when you tap back, you see all the tests in there. How have they actually examined this? The discussion, more calculation. What has the approach been in the solution for all those questions? That's part of your analogy here, right? That's part of your analysis, right? So you're going to write that down as well for a few lines and say, what, okay, 8 plus 7. In previous examinations, this is how it was tested. It doesn't mean anything in terms of how it will be tested in the future, but at least you know what's been out there, right? And it's part of analysis. And then you now start to connect it with other provisions, okay? Like capital gains tax, for example, you have paragraph 20 and paragraph 35 in that provision. You have a base cost provision and you have a proceeds provision. The person who's selling the asset, if he claimed allowances on the pencil, then he now has a recoupment on the pencil. He also has a capital gain on the pencil. The person who, the company that acquires the asset, has a capital gain in their books also. So the CGT principles, the Section 8.4 principles that come into it, that now connect with your 24BA and 40CA principles in a corporate rule transaction. So no longer is it just 24BA and 40CA. It's now paragraph 20, paragraph 35, Section 8.4A. What if you defer the recoupment? Can I defer it? Ask yourself those questions. and how does it connect with those provisions. Once you've done this simplification, grouping, analogy, and connection with other provisions, only then can you start getting more detail. And this is detail from your tutorials, for example. If the tutorials give you a principle that you haven't seen before, that you didn't come across in your lecture slides, you didn't come across in your readings, you didn't come across in the video, then there's something that needs to be added to your learning. So you put it into, once again, these small post-its or flashcards as additional principles to remember as part of your detail in that. And you got it there at any time. You need to refer to it, it's there. You got to that additional detail. Just remember that over and above your analysis in step 2. Right? Then once you've done that, it's about going into memory. Right? You got to remember what stuff is all about. So step 4 is about memory, and you got to be able to retrieve this information from your summary, your 2-page summary. Do you know what everything that you've learned about this so far in your analysis? The pencil example. If I sell it this way, if I sell it that way, these will be the results. If the person was a trust, for example, what would be the situation? This analogy is not just about changing the values around, right? The analogy can also be, what if it was a different taxpayer? What about VAT? What would be the VAT consequence of this, right? So you can do as many hypotheticals you want to do on the analogy side, and that should be a big part of your encoding when you're understanding a subject. Now it means that you're actively deeply learning the subject, as opposed to superficially on the surface, just understanding what it does. And you got to go deeper than what the provision actually says. Right? So that's your step 2 and step 3, and step 4 you got to remember all the stuff. By the time you come to the paper, your summaries, you should be knowing off your summaries that you've got, your 2-page summaries of all of this. You should know them offhand, as opposed to just doing a tut and doing a question. So once you've got those 2-page summaries done in your own words, with the diagrams, with the connections to each of the provisions, in your own simplistic example with the text results of that, that now becomes the basis of your understanding of the subject. And that subject now needs to be known in detail before you attack the subject and you go in to the exam paper. So you ideally, I know we haven't been doing this from the beginning of the year, but from your diagnostic analysis, when you look at all the tests you've done for the whole year, and you know that certain topics you're very weak in, I would immediately advise you to go through this approach and start doing your summaries on those subjects you've done really bad in first, because those take priority. The other ones that you know a little bit better, at least you can start doing them at a later point in time, but prioritize those ones that are risky, those ones that you're really suffering on, that you don't know, you know you're not strong in these things. You got to go there and start doing your summary immediately on those ones. Right? And then step 5 is basically now that we know 24BA links with other provisions like capital gains tax and recoupments under section 884, what is the accounting issue behind it? How for the person now holds shares, how does he record those shares in his personal financial statements if he's a sole proprietor, for example? Would he keep it at cost? How does he measure it for the company that bought the asset? Would they depreciate the asset? What rate would they depreciate the asset? Where would the asset be accounted for? How would the sale or the issue of the shares be accounted for accounting purposes? So you now go, and then what about the auditing? What if the auditors of the company come to you and say, you know what, you now bought this asset. We want to audit the asset in your books. We want to audit the purchase transaction. What would they look at there from audit procedures perspective going into it? And that's now bringing in 24BA in line with auditing, accounting, and managerial accounting and finance. And then step 6 is to go into other commentaries of 24BA that you see on the internet, any capital gains tax guide information that you can find on exchange for assets under the CGT guide, or look at other information that's published by SARS in respect of that, as well as your additional exam papers like ITC and past year papers. So that would be the complete process from beginning to end before you go and write your paper. Right? There's also, you can feedback on your own learning from this quiz, which is you can copy and paste this into your browser, and basically look at this where it asks you about your own learning and how to improve your own learning. So you have to reflect on your own learning as well. And these are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself. How much time do I actually spend on writing notes that actually do not help me, right, in any way? And I think everybody's guilty to some degree of doing this at some point in time. If these notes that you have don't actually connect information to a big picture for you to understand everything, doesn't make the information any simpler for you to understand, doesn't allow you to group ideas together or create the analogies that you want to create or how they relate to each other, then the notes themselves are flawed. So the quality of your learning in terms of your notes, your note taking and summaries that you do really must meet the requirements of what they're saying here, right? Can you recall and apply the knowledge from your memory in multiple ways? Right? Question and answers. Do you reinforce your learning with isolated facts from a different method, flashcards, for example, versus summaries, versus repetition? Do you use the techniques that involve repetitive recall from memory to increase the consistency and speed of your recall accuracy? How fast are you recalling? How accurate are you recalling? Test yourself. Do a thing. Do your summary. Once you've done your summary, how much can I recall from my summary? 80%, 70%, 60%, whatever it is. It's a good starting point to know. I can recall about 60% of this. Right? Then get to the next level, we get 70 and 80%. Eventually, you're going to get to 100% recall of all your topics on all your summaries. Right? So these are just actually more reflections on learning as well. And of course, you can go through this in your own learning after every section. Go to these questions to see how well you know a subject. The last part of it I'll look at is using the AI as part of our learning. The AI we've done earlier session with PGDA students, I think earlier midway in the year, but it does fall into this section here, step 5, integration. And I'm going to stop sharing here and go into the AI software. So try and get into my browser. Okay, so this is what I've been typing up so far. Now, it's very, very good for integration, as I see it, because sometimes we don't really see it, how in the big picture or the big scheme of things, how a tax topic would fit into accounting or auditing, or even management for that matter, in terms of our learning. Now, I'm just going to go try and get to a question here. Okay, so I was hoping that you can see it now. Okay, so this is a question that I asked, and this you can get at the accountingeducation.co.za. It's something that Professor Stephen Concier presented to us earlier in the year. There's a video on this on Learn, so have a look at the video as well. I wouldn't ask this bot detailed tax questions on tax provisions. Let me put that right now, because I think the accuracy of the tax answers alone in isolation is not good enough. But having said that, it's very, very good in IFRS and accounting. So it can really help you in financial accounting. It's also good in auditing. So those two areas, I would definitely help you say, go ahead, use this thing, because it does help you. It's accurate in terms of its IFRS answers. The guy who designed it is an IFRS specialist, so he's an accounting lecturer as well. So that person is very good with accounting. In tax, I didn't find the answers that accurate. He's asked me to beta test the software in terms of tax. So I wouldn't go into detailed tax provisions and getting tax implications from this. But if you understand the tax concept, you want to know that what the accounting implications are, or the math implications, or audit implications. It's very easy to put through this the software and see what it comes up with. Like I got this from a trust question. Now, for example, a natural person, we all know this transaction. A natural person sells an asset on an interest-free loan to a trust. Right? We know this village principle. We know the tax principles behind this. We know the CJT, but what are the accounting principles behind it, right? So you can now go and say, you know what, okay, fine. What are the accounting implications? How will they impact the financial statements of the trust and the person? So these, if it's an integrated question with the trust, you can still have to cover these sections. IFRS 9, 15, and 16 may be relevant. You tell you what the initial recognition, what the trust has to recognize the asset at. On initial recognition, how they have to record the liability, right? Subsequent measurement of the loan and amortized cost on IFRS 9, financial statement impact for the trust, and then for the natural person on the sale of the asset, gain or loss, difference between fair value of assets sold and carrying amount on IFRS 9, record the receivable amount in accordance with IFRS 9 interest-free loan, subsequent measurement, financial statement impact. Right? So it's telling you all the IFRS guidelines that need to be done with a trust question in tax. Right? And thereafter, you can ask yourself, what are the audit implications if I sell it to a trust? If I sell the asset to a trust and on interest-free loan account. And then you go back, okay, on the sale of the asset, there are many audit implications. Auditor need to verify the value of the asset to ensure that it's properly valued, existence and ownership. This is now talking from the trust perspective of buying the asset, right? Does the trust actually own the asset? Does it actually exist? Is it complete revenue? Is everything been disclosed? Has it been subsequent event? Internal controls? Is it a related party transaction? Is it a connected person? Does he also qualify as a related party? So those are the easy implications you can see from using a bot just to generate your integration on your Unity leaving on step 5 of the system, where you have to now start integrating with other subjects and to see how your topic integrates with that. So you can use this bot for the process of actually bringing about the auditing implications or the accounting implications or even the managerial accounting implications. And we've also got substantive procedures that you actually do on the purchase of the asset. It gives you that and the loan raise. Yeah. So this is a hypothetical example of a person selling an asset to a trust. Just to show you that you can use the technology to your advantage to basically get these ideas as part of your summary. Okay, these are the things that I can do from an accounting perspective, from a auditing perspective, or from a management perspective. All right. So any questions from anybody before we close off the session? Go ahead.
Afternoon, Prof. Can I ask a question at the end if nobody else has? It has nothing to do with the syllabus, though.
Okay. Let me see. I don't see any other people raising hands. Let me see. I don't think anyone else has a question, so you can go ahead.
Okay. Do you mind explaining to me what type of investments, tax-free investments are?
What type of investments tax-free investments are?
Yes.
So you get the tax-free investment on its own, which is basically a tax-free savings account. That's the first type of thing you can do, where you get a partial exemption on that because the amount that you contribute towards is limited, but the entire return on the investment is tax-free. That's to encourage tax-free investments. If you're investing in shares, then the dividends, of course, are tax-free from the income tax perspective. From a dividends tax perspective, the company will withdraw with all the tax. Interest investments, exempt up to 23,800 on a 10(1)(i). And then if you have investments in shares and you decide to sell them, you can actually use your annual exclusion to exclude the tax-free portion of it. If you're smart about it, you can structure it in such a way that you don't get taxed at all, provided you're holding it as an investment asset. So if you buy shares for 100,000 bucks, as I said before, you sell it for 140,000 rand. That's a 40,000 rand profit that you're making. But if you sell half of it, it's 20,000 rand profit, and the 20,000 is lower than your annual exclusion of 40,000, so it's entirely tax-free. You could compare that to a dividend that you'd receive, which would subject to dividends tax, but you still pay some tax on that one, as opposed to this, which is completely tax-free. So there's many different options you can look at, but the primary ones are interest, dividends, rentals and royalties you can't get out of. Rentals you can get a deduction on the expenditure that you pay for it. Royalties are fully taxable, so you can't come out of the royalties. So in terms of being tax efficient, the capital gains trying to use your annual exclusion, the 40% inclusion rate, is a good method to try and reduce your tax liability to zero. Apart from that, interest, if you cap it up to about 23,800, max out your 10(1)(i) exemption, and the dividends probably is the third ranking in terms of getting tax exemptions or reduced tax rate on investments.
Okay, and just on that, is the tax-free investments that banks offer, are those savings accounts?
Yeah, those are primarily savings account. The returns are good. I mean, the returns are like reasonable. You get 9-10% returns, like how you get a fixed deposit. Primarily on that range. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Lisa has a question. How do I know what and what not to include in my response when the allocation is 12 marks or 7 marks? There are no exclusions specified. I tend to explain when they say don't say much of the solution or write less when I'm supposed to write more. Yeah, so this is a tricky one because every question needs to be answered on its own merit, and every question is different. So you got to look at, if it's 12 marks, well, what are the key issues? And that's come back to identification of the issues you want to discuss. In your solution, I would suggest you always plan your answer out, especially when the discussion question is long. I would say, when I say long, I would say when it's over 5 marks, it becomes long. You need to start planning your answer. In that case, you need to know what to include and what not to include. How do I know? I mean, the question is, how do I know what to include in my response and what not to include in my response? In a 12-mark question, I mean, you would actually have to plan the answer and say, these are the most important points I want to include in my solution, and am I generating enough? Am I generating at least 10 points in that? Right. So in a 12-mark question, I expect you to generate at least 9 to 10 points on that as a quantum. And then on the relevant side, how relevant is that to the topic you need to do to gauge that from your own knowledge of the subject itself. So you determine the quality of the answer. But from a quantum perspective, it needs to be at least 9 or 10 points. I can tell you that. But from a quality perspective, you need to be able to draw the information to link it back to the question. Will I be able to consult to PMB students online? Yes, why not? So just let me know if you want to consult. I usually do a lot of group consults on Westfield campus. So if you want to join that as well, you're welcome to just give me a message, send me an email, and we can try and set up a consult. My consults usually go for an hour or so with a group of students, normally about 5 students. So if you want to do that, it's fine. If you want to do a virtual consult, we can also do a group virtual consult as well. Happy to do that. Okay, so doesn't look like there's any more questions. Hopefully the session did help you in your own studying, in your own learning, and hopefully it had an impact in terms of your knowledge and competence level when you write this paper, and that you're going to be more prepared. And hopefully I want to see more passes come through. You guys have the ability, you have the know-how, you can do it. Don't doubt yourself for a second. You can do, you got this. You can do this, and you can pass this paper. So from my side, I give you all the encouragement, whatever you need. I'm there. If you want to consult, need motivation, whatever it is, just contact us. But I wish you all the best if I don't see you again. Take care and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Bye.